When it comes to mass media, the one that is affected by perception of class in the United States was social media. Now, I'm a black straight male that grew up with Southern black parents. Why does this matter? Because, as most in my situation, I didn't have a phone until near the end of middle school. In this way, I wasn't accustomed to social media for a while. Even still, the fact that it has skewed my perception of class the way that it has goes to show the power that social media lens can have when it comes to mass influence. For one, there's lots of news every day that I watch regarding rich people like celebrities. Professor Hernandez put it best in a lecture on November 10th when he said, through social media, we're told the concerns of the poor are unimportant and the concerns of the wealthy are concerns for us all. I, like many others, found myself hooked on different little things going on in these people's lives. Another thing that social media shaped my perception on is how the gap in wages affects relationships. I've been socialized through this to believe that men generally have to be making more than their spouse in order to have a higher chance of keeping their relationship. We learned on November 3rd from Professor Hernandez that couples either get a divorce or split up mostly due to financial reasons. It also affects your circle of who you can even date in the first place, as they usually have to be within your class. A Course Media article, The Key to Reducing Poverty, says that people you know open up opportunities, and the growing class divide in the United States closes them off. Moving on to race, there's a big influence I've seen from movies that hasn't affected me personally, but some of the interactions I've had with others. The media that's affected this part of my perspective most is, again, through movies. I'm a huge movie buff, and so I've definitely noticed race tropes and implications throughout my time watching. One of these tropes would be the stereotypical movie characters, usually in kids' movies. In Professor Hernandez's lecture, he points out that people of color tend to play stereotypical characters. He described how black men play streetwise characters and black women play either the sassy and fat woman that gives a white person advice or the hypersexualized woman used to fetishize the skin color. This would be the Mammy and Jezebel roles, respectively. I remember being in middle school and people talking to me and mentioning things about street smarts and the way that I act or talk because of things they've seen in movies that became very popular. It made me feel as though I was supposed to act and talk a certain way to fit into the role that was assigned to me. For instance, people sometimes say, you don't act black, or you act very black. Like, what does that even mean? A great example of this was in a Course Media article, How to See Race, which describes Thomas Nast cartoons that depicted working class Irishmen as chimpanzees with top hats and curling shoes with sideburns. These kinds of things truly affect how people see different races and create different biases towards them. Another Course Media video that shows more of these stereotypes is the modern minority trope, which describes Asian Americans as minorities exploited in movies to be depicted as shy, smart, and most of all, obedient. They show how minorities are supposed to act and that they can make it to success through their hard work just like anybody else. What these stereotypes do is they promote and encourage for people to see things through the white racial frame, which we learned from Professor Hernandez on October 4th that this was the belief that whiteness was natural right, normal, natural right, and good. With this belief, all of the previous tropes I mentioned will seem normal and believable because of this perspective. Finally, with gender, the same media type being movies has influenced my perception the most, as women in movie media has been a very tricky thing to finesse, and I don't believe we ever truly got it right, at least on a mass scale. Of course, there are great movies and characters. Of course, there are great movies and characters with female leads and women with actual vulnerabilities and strengths in overcoming them, but most of the time we get something worse. On November 15th, Professor Hernandez explained that not only are women oversexualized in movies, but as a damsel in distress that can't accomplish much, but we also have what's called a Mary Sue. This is a female character that's essentially perfect but boring. They're not vulnerable, too strong, and seemingly don't have realistic struggles. This isn't good because I have a little sister who has become somewhat afraid to discuss her feelings with me because she doesn't think she's supposed to be vulnerable. Sometimes I have to really pull it out of her and let her know it's okay to feel sad or angry or anything else. That strength isn't being perfect all the time. Another trend in movies regarding gender is the gender socialization roles, shown in many other movies. On October 18th, in a lecture, we learned how starting with the family, we're socialized to believe that the color blue is a boy color and pink is a girl's color. We also discussed the different chores that girls and boys usually carry out, where boys will do outside yard work and girls would do more of the work inside the house. This is exactly how my household was growing up, as my mom said my sister will never be the one to go out and pick up dog poop or mow the lawn. Finally, another huge thing that movies do to us in terms of general socialization is they hammer in the idea that boys and men that show too much emotion are weak, that we're not supposed to do certain things like cry or talk too much about our feelings. Essentially, we're supposed to suffer in silence, and that's not right. According to a Course Media video, What a Sex Worker Can Teach Us About Personal Connection, Nicole Emma says that from a young age, our boys are getting messages that having feelings and needing help is bad. This happens in schools, in sports, on TV, and sometimes in their own families. I have definitely been affected by this, as when I was younger, I felt I wasn't supposed to cry and show my tears to anyone. That being strong wasn't being vulnerable, and instead it was locking everything up and throwing away the key. Luckily, I was able to realize the error in this way of thinking before it caused major damage, but many other men never do realize the error, and they grow up being clinically depressed or suicidal. We see all the time in these movies, men being hard all the time and never showing their vulnerability either. The hero is stoic and unfazed by adversity, always pushing through in the end. Maybe it's time for us to normalize being vulnerable and scared even in the face of uncertainty. Because true bravery is how you react even when you're scared. Now, onto the interviews, how this ties into this CRE specifically. One that I would really like to highlight is the interview that I had with Lena Velstra. She said something very interesting, whereas in my life, my perception in mass media has been affected by mostly movies and a little bit of social media. She, on the other hand, said that hers was through books and literature, which I found very interesting because that's not typically an answer that people would normally give on these questions. And her reasoning was she's an English major and she has read many books in her life as well. And she said that she noticed that these authors with their personal lives affects the way that they write these stories and what they put inside of them. And so she said that she could notice certain biases, specifically on gender, that she read whenever she would cover these stories and this certain types of literature, especially in fiction. And she said that it's not necessarily a bad thing. I asked her if she would say that that's a bad thing, knowing that there's biases in there that she's reading. She said that she wouldn't necessarily call it bad, simply because they have their biases in there, we're able to see things from other people's different perspectives rather than being objective about things, especially since it's fictional tales. And so and so she said it's more so important to understand that there are biases in here and that when you're writing something or reading something or interpreting something that you may place your own bias within it. And so being aware of that simple fact can help us not internalize something that may not be actually factual. And so I agreed with that, and that was one thing I would like to highlight within my interviews. But yes, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.